The cold November wind cut through the Wyoming darkness like a knife when Jonas Lancaster heard the noise coming from his barn, and he knew immediately that something was wrong because his horses never made sounds like that in the middle of the night. He pushed himself up from his chair near the fireplace, muscles tensing beneath his worn flannel shirt as he grabbed the rifle from above the door. His shoulder-length dark hair fell forward as he leaned into the wind, stepping off his porch into the first real snowfall of 1876. The barn door creaked as he pulled it open, rifle ready, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The horses stamped nervously in their stalls, and that was when he saw her. A young woman lay curled in the hay near the back corner, her thin traveling dress completely inadequate for the weather that had blown in that afternoon. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and her body shook violently even in sleep. Jonas set the rifle against the wall and moved quickly to her side, his large calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for signs of life. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers, and he knew she would not survive the night out here. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms, startled by how light she felt, and carried her through the snow to his cabin. Inside, he laid her carefully on the bearskin rug in front of the fire and began working to warm her slowly. He had seen frostbite before, knew the dangers of warming someone too quickly. He added wood to the fire, brought quilts from his bed, and heated water on the stove. As he removed her worn boots, he noticed the holes in the soles, the blisters on her feet. This woman had been walking for a long time. She stirred as warmth began seeping back into her body, her eyelids fluttering. Jonas found himself studying her face in the firelight. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and delicate features that spoke of both strength and exhaustion. When her eyes finally opened, they were the most striking shade of green he had ever seen. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, hoarse and frightened. "You are safe," Jonas said, keeping his voice low and steady. "I am Jonas Lancaster. This is my home about 15 miles north of Coloma, Wyoming. I found you in my barn." Her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. "I am sorry. I did not mean to trespass. I just needed somewhere warm, and I saw your barn, and I thought just for one night." "Hush now," Jonas said, moving to the stove to pour hot broth into a cup. "You can explain when you are stronger. First, you need to get warm and get some food in you." He helped her sit up, supporting her with one arm while holding the cup to her lips with his free hand. She drank slowly, and he could see the moment the warmth began spreading through her because her shaking started to ease. When she finished the broth, he gave her water, then more broth. "What is your name?" he asked. "Zara," she said. "Zara Sullivan." "Where were you heading, Miss Sullivan?" Fresh tears appeared in her eyes. "Anywhere. Nowhere. I was just running." Jonas waited, not pushing, just watching her with patient dark eyes. Outside, the wind howled and snow began falling harder. After a long moment, she continued. "I was running from my stepfather," Zara said, her voice breaking. "My mother died last spring in Kansas, and he became someone different. Mean, cruel. He started looking at me in ways that made my skin crawl. Started saying things about how I belonged to him now, how I would take my mother's place in every way." She shuddered, and Jonas felt anger burn hot in his chest. 3 days ago, he told me we would be married within the week. I left that night with nothing but the dress on my back and what little money I had saved. I walked to the train station, bought a ticket as far west as my money would take me, which was Cheyenne. From there, I just kept walking. "That is over 100 miles from here," Jonas said, disbelief coloring his tone. "You walked over 100 miles. I caught rides when I could on wagons heading west, but most of the last 3 days, yes, I walked. I knew winter was coming. I knew I needed to find somewhere to shelter, but I had no money left, and every town I passed through either had no work or no place for a woman alone. She looked up at him, and the desperation in her eyes made his heart clench. I know I cannot stay here. I will leave in the morning. I just needed one warm night. You are not going anywhere in this weather, Jonas said firmly. Look outside. Zara turned her head toward the window, where snow now fell so thick they could barely see the barn. The wind rattled the shutters, and even inside the sturdy cabin they could feel its force. That is a blizzard building, Jonas continued. It will last days, maybe a week. Anyone caught out in it will die. You will stay here until it passes, and then we will figure out what comes next. I cannot impose on you like that, Zara protested, but her voice was weak. It is not an imposition. It is survival. Jonas stood, his full height impressive in the small cabin. He was well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and arms thick with muscle from years of trapping, hunting, and working his land. You are exhausted. You need sleep. Take my bed. I will make a pallet here by the fire. I cannot take your bed, Zara argued, but Jonas was already pulling blankets from a chest. You can and you will, he said in a tone that left no room for argument. I have slept in far worse places than a warm cabin floor. Go on now. Zara tried to stand and swayed dangerously. Jonas caught her before she could fall, lifting her easily into his arms. She was too tired to protest as he carried her to the bedroom and laid her on the thick mattress. He pulled quilts over her, and she was asleep before he left the room. Jonas returned to the main room and stood looking out the window at the storm. He had lived alone in these mountains for 5 years now, ever since his parents died of fever back in Missouri, and he decided to head west for a fresh start. He had grown accustomed to solitude, even preferred it most days. But something about finding Zara in his barn, about the desperate courage it must have taken for her to run the way she did, stirred something in him he thought long buried. The storm raged for 6 days. During that time, Jonas and Zara settled into a careful routine. He did his best to maintain her modesty, always knocking before entering his own bedroom, averting his eyes when she washed at the basin. But the cabin was small, and they could not help but grow familiar with each other. Zara proved to be capable and proud despite her circumstances. As soon as she regained her strength, she insisted on helping with meals, mending his clothes that she noticed were torn and fraying, tidying the cabin. Jonas protested at first, but he came to understand that she needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she was earning her keep. They talked during the long hours trapped inside by the storm. Jonas told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents, about the years he spent learning to trap and hunt in these mountains. He told her about the loneliness that sometimes pressed down on him during the long winters, and the peace he found in the wild places where most men feared to go. Zara shared her own story more slowly, in pieces. She spoke of a happy childhood with loving parents in Kansas, of her father dying when she was 16, of her mother remarrying a man who seemed kind at first. She described her mother's illness, the way her stepfather changed after the funeral, becoming possessive and threatening. Jonas listened to it all, his hands clenching into fists when she described the fear she lived with those final months before she fled. "You are very brave," he told her on the 4th night of the storm as they sat by the fire after supper. "I do not feel brave," Zara said quietly. "I feel like a coward who ran away. Running from danger is not cowardice. It is survival. Staying would have destroyed you." Jonas leaned forward, his dark eyes intense in the firelight. "You walked over 100 miles in late autumn with winter coming and no clear destination. You survived on strength and determination when most people would have given up. That is bravery, Zara." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Jonas felt it like a physical force, this pull toward her that had been growing stronger each day. He stood abruptly, uncomfortable with the feeling. "I should check on the horses," he said, even though he had checked on them just an hour before. He pulled on his heavy coat and went out into the blizzard, forcing himself to stay in the barn longer than necessary, giving himself time to think. He barely knew this woman. She had been in his home less than a week. But already he found himself looking forward to seeing her face in the morning, to hearing her laugh when he said something amusing, to watching her move around his cabin as though she belonged there. When he returned to the house, Zara had already retired to the bedroom. Jonas lay on his pallet by the fire and stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside and trying not to think about the fact that eventually the storm would end and Zara would leave. On the 7th morning, Jonas woke to silence. The wind had stopped. He rose and looked out the window to see clear skies and snow that had drifted as high as the windowsills in places. The world was transformed into something beautiful and deadly. Zara emerged from the bedroom and Jonas saw the knowledge in her eyes. The storm was over. The time had come for difficult decisions. "The nearest town is Coloma," Jonas said as they ate breakfast. "It is about 15 miles south. Once I can dig us out and the trails are passable, I can take you there. It is a small town, but decent folk live there. Someone might have work for you, a place to stay." "How long before the trails are passable?" Zara asked. Jonas considered. "With this much snow, at least a few days. Maybe a week." Something like relief crossed Zara's face, and Jonas felt an answering emotion in his own chest. Neither of them was ready to say goodbye yet. Those next days were different from the storm days. Jonas began the hard work of digging out, of checking his trap lines, of hunting for fresh meat. Zara insisted on helping where she could, feeding the horses, keeping the fire going, preparing meals. They worked together with an easy rhythm that felt natural, comfortable. One afternoon, Jonas was chopping wood when he felt eyes on him. He turned to see Zara watching from the doorway, her cheeks flushed. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly, but not before he saw the interest there. His heart beat faster as he brought the axe down, splitting another log. That evening, as they prepared supper together in the small kitchen, Zara's hand brushed against his as they both reached for the same pot. The contact sent electricity through Jonas, and he pulled back as though burned. But Zara did not move away. Instead, she looked up at him, and the longing in her eyes matched what he felt in his soul. "Zara," he said, his voice rough, "I am just a mountain man. I have little to offer except this cabin and a hard life in these mountains." "You saved my life," she whispered. "You took me in when you had no reason to, showed me kindness when I had almost forgotten what that felt like. This past week has been the safest, most peaceful I have felt in years." Jonas lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. His palm was rough against her soft skin, his fingers careful despite their strength. "I find myself not wanting you to leave," he admitted, "but I will not trap you here. You deserve the choice I know you were denied before." "What if I choose to stay?" Zara asked, leaning into his touch. "Then I would spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regretted it," Jonas said. He lowered his head slowly, and when their lips met, it was gentle and searching. Zara's hands came up to grip his shirt, and Jonas wrapped his free arm around her waist, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, and Jonas felt something fundamental shift in his chest, like a door he had kept locked for years suddenly swinging open. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jonas rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said simply. "Stay with me." Yes, Zara breathed. Yes, I will stay. Over the following weeks, as winter settled in fully over the Wyoming mountains, Jonas and Zara built a life together. Jonas made the long trek to Coloma to file a claim that Zara was his wife, providing her legal protection should her stepfather ever come looking. The clerk, a kindly older man named Herbert Mills, did not question the lack of ceremony, simply recorded the information and wished them well. While in town, Jonas also visited the general store and used nearly all his saved money to buy fabric for dresses, a warm coat in Zara's size, sturdy boots, and supplies they would need to get through the winter. The storekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman with knowing eyes, smiled warmly when Jonas explained he had recently married. "About time you found yourself a wife, Jonas Lancaster," she said. "A man should not live alone in those mountains forever. You bring her by when the weather clears. I would like to meet the woman who finally caught you." When Jonas returned home with his purchases, Zara's eyes filled with tears at the coat and boots. "This is too much," she protested. "You spent your whole savings." "Money can be earned again," Jonas said, helping her into the coat. "Keeping you warm and safe is worth more than any amount of coins." He fastened the buttons and stood back to admire how the dark blue wool brought out the color of her eyes. "Besides, you are my wife now. What I have is yours." "Only by law," Zara said quietly, "not by God." Jonas took her hands in his. "When spring comes and the circuit preacher makes his rounds, we will do it proper in a church if you want. But in my heart, Zara, you are already my wife. You have been since the moment I carried you out of that barn." Zara stepped closer, rising on her toes to kiss him. "And you have been my husband since the moment I woke to find you watching over me with such gentle concern. I do not need a preacher to make that real." That night, their relationship changed again. Jonas had continued sleeping on the pallet by the fire, determined to court Zara properly despite their isolation. But when he prepared his bedroll that evening, Zara stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Sleep in your own bed tonight," she said softly. "With me." "Zara, I do not want you to feel obligated," Jonas started, but she pressed her fingers to his lips. "I feel many things for you, Jonas Lancaster, but obligation is not one of them. I want this. I want you." Jonas searched her eyes and found only certainty there. He took her hand and led her to the bedroom, and they came together with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and changed. Afterward, as Zara slept curled against his side, her head on his chest, Jonas stared at the ceiling and marveled at how completely his life had transformed in just a few short weeks. Winter deepened, and the world outside became a frozen wilderness. But inside the cabin, warmth and love grew. Jonas taught Zara to shoot, to set traps, to read the signs of weather in the sky. Zara taught Jonas to enjoy simple pleasures he had forgotten, like music hummed while working, like long conversations about dreams and hopes, like laughter that filled the cabin and chased away the loneliness he had grown so accustomed to. They learned each other's bodies and hearts with equal dedication. Jonas discovered that Zara loved having her hair brushed, that she hummed when she was content, that she had a wicked sense of humor beneath her quiet exterior. Zara learned that Jonas was ticklish along his ribs despite his fierce exterior, that he had a beautiful singing voice he only shared when he thought she was asleep, that his rough hands could be impossibly gentle. Christmas came, and Jonas surprised Zara with a gift he had been carving in secret during his time in the barn. It was a small wooden box, intricately detailed with flowers and vines. Inside, he had placed a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. "It is not much," he said as Zara stared at the ring with tears streaming down her face. "But it was my mother's, and I know she would want you to have it. It is everything, Zara whispered. She slipped it on her finger where it fit perfectly, then threw her arms around Jonas's neck. Thank you. I have something for you as well. She retrieved a package wrapped in cloth and handed it to him shyly. Inside was a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had salvaged from her own worn dress, every stitch perfect and even. But what made Jonas's throat tight was the embroidery along the collar, his initials worked in careful thread. So everyone will know you belong to someone, Zara said with a small smile. So they will know you are loved. Jonas pulled her into his arms and held her close, overcome with emotion. I have never been happier than I am right now in this moment with you, he said into her hair. Nor have I, Zara replied. January brought the hardest cold, temperatures that made going outside dangerous. They stayed close to the cabin, venturing out only when absolutely necessary to care for the animals. During those long days and nights pressed together by weather and choice, they talked about the future. I want children, Zara said one night as they lay in bed, the fire crackling in the other room. Someday. Not right away, but someday. I want that too, Jonas said, running his fingers through her hair. I think about it sometimes, about a little boy or girl running around the cabin. About teaching them to ride, to hunt, to respect the wilderness. About you teaching them, Zara corrected with a smile. I still cannot hit anything smaller than a barn with that rifle, Jonas laughed. You are getting better. Just last week you hit that tree you were aiming at. I was aiming at the deer beside the tree, Zara pointed out, but she was laughing too. Details, Jonas said, kissing her forehead. We have time to work on your aim before we need to worry about feeding children. February proved Zara right about their timeline when she woke one morning and barely made it outside before being violently sick. Jonas held her hair back, his face creased with worry, until the spell passed. When it happened again the next 3 mornings, understanding dawned on both of them. A baby, Zara said, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, wonder and fear mixing in her voice. Jonas, we are going to have a baby. Jonas dropped to his knees in front of her, pressing his ear to her belly as though he might hear something. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. A baby, he repeated, our baby. Are you happy? Zara asked, needing to hear it. Happy does not begin to cover it, Jonas said, rising and lifting her into his arms to spin her around gently. You have given me everything, Zara. A home that is more than just walls, a purpose beyond survival, and now this. I am the luckiest man alive. The rest of winter passed in a glow of anticipation. Jonas became even more protective, insisting Zara rest more, take on fewer chores. Zara tolerated his hovering with good humor, knowing it came from love. She had never felt so cherished, so valued. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and opening the trails, they made the journey to Coloma together. True to her word, Mrs. Patterson was delighted to meet Zara and immediately took her under her wing, introducing her to the other women in town. Zara found herself welcomed into their circle, invited to quilting bees and social gatherings. The circuit preacher arrived in late April, and Jonas and Zara were married properly in the small church, with half the town in attendance. Zara wore a simple dress of pale yellow that Mrs. Patterson and the other women had helped her sew, and Jonas wore the shirt Zara had made him for Christmas. When they exchanged vows, there was not a dry eye in the building, including their own. I, Jonas, take you, Zara, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Jonas said, his deep voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. I promise to protect you, provide for you, honor you, and love you for all the days of my life. You are my heart, my home, my everything. I, Zara, take you, Jonas, to be my lawfully wedded husband, Zara replied, her voice soft but clear. "I promise to stand beside you, support you, respect you, and love you for all the days of my life. You saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I am yours forever." The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Jonas kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in cheers. At the celebration afterward, held in the town hall, Jonas barely left Zara's side, his hand always on her waist or holding hers. "You did well, Lancaster," said Thomas Reed, one of the ranchers who lived south of town. "She is a fine woman." "I know," Jonas said, watching Zara laugh at something Mrs. Patterson was saying. "I am the one who married well." Summer arrived in full force and Jonas worked hard to expand the cabin in preparation for the baby. He built an additional room, crafted a cradle from pine, and installed a larger window to let in more light. Zara planted a garden, learning from trial and error what would grow in the mountain soil. They made regular trips to Coloma, integrating themselves into the community. Jonas took on work when it was offered, helping build barns or tracking problem predators, building their savings back up. Zara became known for her sewing skills and began taking in mending work, proud to contribute. In late September, as the leaves turned gold and red, Zara went into labor. Jonas rode hard to Coloma to fetch Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the few female doctors in the territory, who had settled there the year before. Dr. Chen arrived quickly and competently guided Zara through the long hours of labor while Jonas paced outside, useless and terrified. When a baby's cry finally split the air, Jonas burst through the door to find Dr. Chen holding a tiny, red-faced infant. "You have a son," she said with a tired smile. "A healthy, strong boy." Jonas moved to the bed where Zara lay exhausted but radiant. She held out her arms for the baby, and when Dr. Chen placed him there, Jonas sat carefully on the edge of the bed, both of them staring in wonder at the miracle they had created. "He is perfect," Jonas whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby gripped it immediately and Jonas felt his heart expand impossibly further. "What should we name him?" Zara asked. Jonas thought for a moment. "James," he said. "After my father, James Sullivan Lancaster." Zara smiled. "James, I love it. Hello, little James. Welcome to the world." Those first months with James were exhausting and exhilarating. Jonas proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Zara for feeding, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, changing nappies without complaint. Watching him with their son made Zara fall even more deeply in love with her husband. As James grew from infant to baby to toddler, the cabin filled with new sounds. Laughter, crying, babbling, and eventually words. Jonas taught his son to walk by holding his hands and encouraging him across the floor. Zara taught him songs and stories. Together, they created a home full of love and joy. When James was 2, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, a daughter arrived the following summer, with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. They named her Julia, and James was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growing children. Jonas expanded the cabin again and again as their family grew. A third child arrived, another son they named Joseph, followed by twin girls 2 years later, Jessica and Jane. The cabin that had once housed a lonely mountain man now overflowed with life and love. Jonas proved to be everything Zara had believed him to be that winter night when he promised to make sure she never regretted staying. He was patient and kind, strong and protective. He taught his sons to hunt and trap, to respect the wilderness and the creatures in it. He taught his daughters the same skills, believing they needed to be able to take care of themselves. But mostly, He taught all his children about love through his actions, through the way he treated their mother with unwavering respect and devotion. Zara blossomed in the life she and Jonas built together. The frightened, desperate girl who had collapsed in his barn became a confident, capable woman. She became known throughout the area for her kindness, often taking in travelers who needed help, always remembering what it felt like to be alone and desperate. But she never let anyone take advantage of her family, and Jonas loved her fierceness as much as her gentleness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jonas surprised Zara with a trip back to Coloma, leaving the children in the care of Mrs. Patterson for the night. They stayed at the small hotel, a luxury they rarely indulged in, and had dinner at the restaurant. Afterward, they walked under the stars, hand in hand. "You ever regret it?" Jonas asked. "Giving up the possibility of an easier life in town for the hardship of the mountains?" Zara stopped walking and turned to face him, cupping his bearded face in her hands. "Not for one single moment," she said fiercely. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed: a real home, true love, beautiful children, purpose and partnership. How could I ever regret that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Jonas said, covering her hands with his. "I am more than happy. I am fulfilled. I am loved. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, with exactly who I am supposed to be with." Zara rose on her toes to kiss him. "That night you found me in your barn was the night my real life began. Everything before was just surviving. You taught me how to live." Jonas pulled her close, holding her tight against his chest. "You did the same for me," he said into her hair. "I thought I was content alone, but I was just existing. You brought joy and meaning to everything. You made this mountain into a real home instead of just a place to sleep." They stood there under the Wyoming stars, holding each other, until the cool night air drove them back to the hotel. That night, they loved each other with the passion of newlyweds and the deep knowledge of long married partners. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters when food was scarce and illness threatened. There were accidents and injuries, like when James broke his arm falling from a tree and Jonas rode through a snowstorm to fetch Dr. Chen. There were moments of fear, like when Julia wandered too far from the cabin, and they spent hours searching before finding her asleep under a pine tree. But there were far more moments of joy. First words and first steps, holidays celebrated with homemade decorations and simple gifts that meant everything. Summer days spent swimming in the creek, autumn afternoons harvesting the garden, winter evenings gathered around the fire while Jonas told stories and Zara sewed. When Zara was 35 and Jonas was 38, they welcomed their 6th and final child, a son they named Jonathan. By then, James was 13 and already nearly as tall as his father, showing signs of the same broad shoulders and muscular build. He helped Jonas with the heavy work now, and Jonas swelled with pride at the fine young man his eldest was becoming. The older children doted on baby Jonathan, and Zara often found herself watching her family with tears of gratitude in her eyes. From that desperate flight through the cold to this warm, chaotic, beautiful life seemed impossible, yet here she was. One autumn evening, when Jonathan was 3 and the older children were occupied with chores and homework, Zara and Jonas sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Jonas had his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "I was thinking today about that night," Zara said quietly. "The night you found me in the barn. I think about it often," Jonas admitted. "About how different my life would be if I had not heard the noise, if I had decided it could wait until morning." "I would have died," Zara said simply. "I was so cold, so exhausted. Another few hours and I would not have woken up. Jonas tightened his arm around her. "But I did hear the noise, and I did go out, and I found the most precious thing I could ever hope to find." "We found each other," Zara corrected. "You gave me shelter and warmth and safety, but I gave you something too." "Everything," Jonas said. "You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the first stars appear. Inside, they could hear the children laughing, arguing, playing, the sounds of family. The sounds of home. "No regrets?" Jonas asked, as he often did. "Not a single one," Zara replied, as she always did. "You? Only that I cannot go back and tell that lonely man I used to be what was coming. That his life was about to become more full and rich and beautiful than he ever imagined possible." Zara turned to kiss him softly. "He figured it out soon enough." As the years continued to march forward, the children grew and began making their own paths. James, at 18, announced his intention to file for land adjacent to his father's, to build his own cabin and start his own life while staying close to family. Jonas helped him build it, and Zara cried happy tears when her eldest son moved into his own home. Julia, strong-willed and independent, declared at 16 that she wanted to become a doctor like Dr. Chen. Jonas and Zara supported her dream, and when she turned 18, they helped her move to Cheyenne to attend the medical school there, one of the few that accepted women. It was hard to have her so far away, but they were immensely proud. Joseph showed an aptitude for horses and began working at the Reed Ranch, making a name for himself as a skilled trainer. The twins, Jessica and Jane, were inseparable and showed artistic talent, painting and sketching everything they saw. Jonathan, the baby, was still young but already showing signs of his father's size and strength, combined with his mother's gentle heart. Through it all, Jonas and Zara remained the center around which their family orbited. Their love had not dimmed with time but had grown deeper, richer, more complex. They knew each other's moods and thoughts, could communicate with a glance, moved around each other with practiced ease. On winter evenings, when the children who still lived at home were asleep, Jonas and Zara would sit by the fire as they had done since that first winter. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, but always they were together. "Tell me again," Zara said one such night, her head resting on Jonas's shoulder as they sat on the bearskin rug that still occupied its place before the hearth. "Tell you what?" Jonas asked, though he knew. "About finding me in the barn. What you thought when you first saw me." Jonas smiled, indulging her as he always did when she asked for this story. "I thought the angels had sent me a gift," he said, the words familiar and beloved. "I thought I must be dreaming, because why else would such a beautiful woman appear in my barn in the middle of a snowstorm?" "I was half frozen and filthy," Zara protested, as she always did. "You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Jonas countered, as he always did. "And when your eyes opened and I saw that green, I was lost. Right then, in that moment, I was yours." "I love you," Zara said, tilting her face up for a kiss. "I love you," Jonas replied, obliging her. "Forever." 25 years after that fateful November night, Jonas and Zara celebrated their official 25th wedding anniversary, though they considered themselves married from that first winter. Their children and grandchildren gathered, James having married and produced 2 children of his own, Joseph engaged to a rancher's daughter. The cabin had been expanded so many times it was now a sprawling house, with additions jutting out in every direction. But the original room, the one where Jonas had brought Zara that night, remained unchanged. They kept the bearskin rug, the fireplace, the same basic furniture. It was their sanctuary, the place where everything began. At the anniversary celebration, held in the summer when travel was easiest, James stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us what real love looks like, who showed us that family is built on respect, trust, and unwavering commitment, who proved that the greatest adventures are not found in traveling the world, but in building a life with the right person." "Hear, hear," chorused the assembled family and friends. Jonas and Zara stood together, his arm around her waist, her hand over his heart. They looked around at the faces of their children and grandchildren, at the friends they had made over the years, at the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. That night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, Jonas and Zara stood on the porch under the stars. The Wyoming sky stretched endless above them, the same sky that had witnessed their first meeting, their first kiss, every important moment of their lives together. "I would do it all again," Zara said softly. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear, I would do it all again for this." "So would I," Jonas agreed. "Finding you in that barn was finding my destiny. Everything I am, everything I have, everything that matters, all of it comes back to that night." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. The girl who ran away from cruelty and the man who lived alone in the mountains had become partners, lovers, friends, and the foundation of a family that would continue for generations. When they finally went inside, it was to the bedroom that had been theirs for a quarter of a century. They loved each other with the passion that had never faded, then lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the sound of their house settling around them. "You remember what you said to me that first morning?" Zara asked, "when I tried to leave." "I said you were not going anywhere in that weather," Jonas recalled, "that you would stay until it passed. And then you said we would figure out what came next," Zara continued. "Did you ever imagine this is what would come next?" Jonas considered. "No," he admitted. "I hoped you might stay longer than the storm. I did not dare hope for anything beyond that. But even in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined anything this perfect." "Neither could I," Zara whispered. "Thank you, Jonas, for finding me, for keeping me, for loving me." "Thank you," Jonas replied, "for being brave enough to run, to survive, to say yes when I asked you to stay. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara Lancaster." They drifted to sleep holding each other as they had done for 25 years, as they would continue to do for all the years remaining to them. The years continued their steady march. Jonas and Zara grew older, their hair turning gray, their movements becoming slower, but their love never aged. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing season. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. Julia returned from medical school and set up practice in Coloma, becoming beloved by the community. Joseph married his rancher's daughter and took over the Reed Ranch when Thomas retired. The twins opened a studio in town where they sold their artwork. Jonathan grew into a man as large and strong as his father, with the same protective instinct and gentle heart. James and his wife presented Jonas and Zara with 5 grandchildren, Joseph with 3, Julia with 2 despite her demanding career. The twins each married and had children of their own, and Jonathan eventually wed a school teacher from Cheyenne who matched his kindness and strength. The house that had started as a simple cabin now served as the gathering place for a family that numbered in the dozens. Holidays and birthdays brought everyone together, filling the rooms with laughter and love and noise that would have astounded that lonely mountain man from decades ago. Jonas and Zara, now in their 60s, often sat together on the porch and watched their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, and marveled at the legacy they had created. "We did well," Jonas said one afternoon, watching his oldest grandson help one of the younger children climb a tree. "We did," Zara agreed. "Better than well. We built something that will last long after we are gone." "Not yet," Jonas said firmly, squeezing her hand. "I am not ready to be gone yet. I have too much more time I want with you." "Good," Zara replied, "because I am not ready either. I still have so much more love to give you." They lived into their 70s, both remarkably healthy despite the hard work and harsh winters they had endured. Jonas still chopped wood and hunted, though not as far or as often. Zara still kept a garden and sewed, though her fingers were not as nimble as they once were. On a crisp November evening, nearly 50 years after Jonas had found Zara in his barn, they sat together by the fire in that original room. The rest of the house was quiet, the grandchildren gone home, the children living their own lives. It was just the two of them as it had been in the beginning. 50 years, Zara said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I remember every moment, Jonas said. Every important day, every small joy, every challenge we faced together. I would not trade a single one. "When you carried me inside that night, did you know?" Zara asked. "Did you know it was forever?" Jonas thought about it. "I knew you were important," he said slowly. "I knew I wanted to protect you. I knew that having you in my home felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years." "Did I know it was forever? Maybe not consciously, but my heart knew. My soul knew." "Mine too," Zara said softly. "Even in my fear and exhaustion, even when I thought I would leave as soon as the storm ended, some part of me knew I was home." Jonas stood, his movements still strong despite his age, and held out his hand to Zara. She took it and let him pull her to her feet. He drew her into his arms, and they swayed together to music only they could hear. "I love you, Zara Lancaster," Jonas said, his voice still deep and sure. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you, and I will love you beyond my last breath." "I love you, Jonas Lancaster," Zara replied. "You are my savior, my partner, my home. You are everything." They continued to dance in the firelight, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and created a light that would never go out. Jonas and Zara lived well into their 80s, a remarkable achievement for their time and place. They remained in the house they had built together, surrounded by family until the very end. Jonas passed first, quietly in his sleep with Zara holding his hand. She grieved deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they had built. Zara followed her beloved husband 3 months later, as though she could not bear to be apart from him for long. She died peacefully, surrounded by family, her last words a whisper of Jonas's name. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their land, under the Wyoming sky that had witnessed their love story. Their children made sure the headstone reflected the truth of their relationship, with words Zara had once spoken carved into the stone. "Here lie Jonas and Zara Lancaster." He found her in a barn during a winter storm and brought her inside forever. Their love was the foundation upon which a family was built, a legacy that will endure for generations. And it did endure. Their children told their grandchildren the story of how Jonas found Zara, how he saved her life and she saved his in return. The grandchildren told their own children, and those children told theirs. The story became family legend, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the choice to say yes to the unknown. The house stood for over 100 years, maintained by descendants who understood its importance. The original room, where Jonas first brought Zara, was preserved exactly as it had been, the bearskin rug still before the fireplace, a shrine to a love that changed everything. Visitors to the property would stand in that room and feel something, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature, a sense of peace and rightness. Some said it was the spirits of Jonas and Zara, still present in the place where their forever began. But those who knew the family understood it was simpler than that. It was love, pure and true, so powerful that it had soaked into the very walls and floorboards. It was the physical manifestation of a promise kept, of a life well lived, of two souls who found each other against impossible odds and chose to hold on. The story of Jonas and Zara became more than just family history. It became a reminder that love can be found in the darkest moments, that kindness can change the course of a life, that saying yes to possibility can lead to unimaginable joy. And on cold November nights in Wyoming, when the wind howls and the snow begins to fall, some say you can still see two figures standing on the porch of the old Lancaster house, holding each other close, looking out at the mountains with contentment and love shining in their eyes. The mountain man who found a desperate girl sleeping in his barn, who brought her inside and gave her not just shelter but a home, a family, a life beyond her wildest dreams. The girl who was brave enough to run, strong enough to survive, and wise enough to recognize love when it found her in the most unlikely place. Their story, born in winter's embrace and lasting through all the seasons of a long and beautiful life, remained as their greatest legacy. Not the land they claimed, not the house they built, not even the large and loving family they created. Their greatest legacy was the proof that true love exists, that it can be found in the most unexpected moments, and that when it is nurtured and protected and cherished, it can transform everything. Jonas brought Zara inside that November night so long ago, and true to the promise they made each other, it was forever. Forever in the years they spent together, forever in the children and grandchildren who carried their love forward, forever in the story that would be told as long as there were Lancasters to tell it. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the Wyoming wilderness, proving that the strongest shelters are not made of wood and stone, but of arms that hold you close and a heart that promises never to let go. And somewhere, beyond the veil that separates this world from the next, Jonas and Zara were together still, dancing in firelight that never dims, holding each other as they had done in life, their love eternal and unbreakable, a beacon for all who seek proof that true love is not just a fairy tale, but a reality waiting to be found by those brave enough to believe.